Hello everyone, Grandpa Ron here again. Hope you're all having a great day. We're going to get back into our Slice of Truth series on Exodus, and today we're going to look at chapter 2. Remember in chapter 1 we talked about how the Egyptians began to oppress the children of Israel. Remember when Joseph saved Israel from the 7 years of famine, and Israel's family came to Egypt to live. They were welcomed with open arms, and the Pharaoh gave them a special area to reside in. They were on very good terms, and when Israel passed away, they even sent a royal procession to his funeral and everything. But over the years, as time went by, things changed. And we saw how that foreign influences took over the government of Egypt. And they felt threatened by the Israelis because they were growing over the several hundred years. You know, they grew by leaps and bounds. And so they began to oppress them. First thing they tried in chapter 1 was telling the midwives to kill all the male children, males being potential soldiers in the future. But that didn't work. The midwives sneakily disobeyed that. They feared the Lord. And so we're going to see what happens now in chapter 2. Verse 1, Now a man from the house of Levi went and married the daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was beautiful, she hid him for 3 months. Remember that right at the end of chapter 1, the Pharaoh commanded all of his people that if there was a male child born, they were to throw him in the river, throw him in the Nile. And so here we have an Israeli woman and her husband that have a beautiful child, and they try to hide him. Verse 3, but when she could hide him no longer, she got him a wicker basket and covered it over with tar and pitch. Then she put the child into it and set it among the reeds by the bank of the Nile, and his sister stood at a distance to find out what would happen to him. Well, in a way, they're obeying the Pharaoh because they did put him in the Nile, but they put him in the basket. I guess at some point it becomes very difficult to hide a child, especially if they're crying and get to the point where they're moving about more. So I know that was with great sadness she did this, but they must have expected or hoped for something good to happen. Now all this would have been about 1525 BC, working backward from known dates, and that's not locked in stone or anything, but about 1525 BC. So the children of Israel have been in Egypt now for several hundred years. So you can imagine how they've grown in numbers. Verse 5, Then the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the Nile, with her maidens walking alongside the Nile. And she saw the basket among the reeds, and sent her maid, and she brought it to her. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the boy was crying. And she had pity on him and said, This is one of the Hebrews' children. So she knew it was one of the Hebrews' children. And let's see what she's going to do. She had pity on him, so let's see what she's going to do. Verse 7, Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, Shall I go and call a nurse for you from the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Go ahead. So the girl went and called the child's mother. Now, it's possible Pharaoh's daughter suspected what was going on, but maybe not. But the little girl actually runs and gets the actual mother and brings her back to nurse the child. So not only is the child saved by Pharaoh's daughter, but now the mother, the actual mother, is going to be the one taking care of the child. Now, just as an aside, you can go on the internet and find some wonderful historical things. This was on a website called history.com, and it's believed that this Pharaoh's daughter actually became a female pharaoh. That's just a title, you know, down the road. And I won't pronounce this right, but it's Hatshepsut. And I'm going to read a little bit this to you. It says, she was the daughter of King Thutmose I, became queen of Egypt when she married her half-brother Thutmose II around the age of 12. Upon his death, she began acting as regent for her stepson, the infant Thutmose III, but later took on the full powers of a pharaoh, becoming co-ruler of Egypt around 1473 BC. As Pharaoh, Hatshepsut extended Egyptian trade and oversaw ambitious building projects, most notably the Temple of Deir el-Bahari, located in western Thebes, where she would be buried. At her own orders, she is often depicted as a male in many contemporary images and sculptures depicted as having a beard, which I guess was a symbol of some type of authority. But it's interesting to know that little bit of history. Let's go on. Verse 9. Then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I shall give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. So they're following the Pharaoh's orders by putting the child in the Nile. The intent of the Pharaoh, of course, was that you would kill the child. The Pharaoh's daughter sees the basket, has pity on the child, and now is actually paying the actual mother, whether she knew it or not, to nurse the child. You know, sometimes even today, we can see in the world around us crazy rules and laws and actions by world leaders, and this is a good reminder to us that God's will is going to override anything they try to do. It's God's will that's going to be done. And looking back in our own lives, I'm sure you can find things where at the time things seem kind of absurd and crazy, but looking back you can see how God's hand, His divine providence, made things work out the way they did in your life. Anyway, let's continue. Verse 10, and the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she named him Moses, and said, because I drew him out of the water. So now this child, Moses, is going to be residing with the Pharaoh and his family. Now remember, we talked about, I think we mentioned in one of the previous classes, that in ancient Egypt, their use of hieroglyphics was very complicated, and really the only people that knew how to read and write hieroglyphics were the priests, and the priest would teach the Pharaoh and his family how to read. So those were the only ones really that could read and write hieroglyphics. It was a pretty select group. But now Moses is going to be raised in the Pharaoh's household, which means he's going to be exposed to all kinds of cosmopolitan ideas and things like that. But keep in mind, for the early period of his life, he was with his Israeli mother. So those are the most important years in a child's life growing up, the first few years. And we can be sure that this Israeli mother taught him about the God of Israel, about the history of the Israelis and the patriarchs. So we know that even before he started to be raised in the Pharaoh's household, he had a strong identification with the children of Israel and the God of Israel. Verse 11, now it came about in those days when Moses had grown up that he went out to his brethren and looked on their hard labors, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his brethren. So he looked this way and that, and when he saw there was no one around, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. So Moses has actually committed a murder, apparently. Can't see where this was self-defense or anything, but let's see what happens. Verse 13. And he went out the next day, and behold, 2 Hebrews were fighting with each other. And he said to the offender, why are you striking your companion? But he said, who made you prince or judge over us? Are you intending to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? Wow. Then Moses was afraid and said, surely the matter has become known. So even though he thought he had done it in secret, nobody saw him. Apparently, word had got around. Verse 15, when Pharaoh heard of this matter, he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from the presence of Pharaoh and settled in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. This causes Moses to have to flee Egypt. The Pharaoh is trying to kill him, and he escapes. Verse 16. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. Then the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. So Moses is there salvaging their hard work and filling up the water troughs. Verse 18, when they came to Reuel their father, he said, why have you come back so soon today? So they said, an Egyptian delivered us from the hand of the shepherds, and what is more, he even drew the water for us and watered the flock. And he said to his daughters, where is he then? Why is it that you have left the man behind? Invite him to have something to eat. And Moses was willing to dwell with the man and gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses. Moses is getting a little reputation here. He's helped out with the hospitality of the region. They bring him in. He has food. And over a period of time, I mean, it reads like this happens boom, 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 but over a period of time, he gives his daughter Zipporah to Moses. So Moses marries Zipporah. Verse 22. Then she gave birth to a son, and he named him Gershom, for he said, I have been a sojourner in a foreign land. Now it came about in the course of those many days that the king of Egypt died. And the sons of Israel sighed because of the bondage, and they cried out, and their cry for help because of their bondage rose up to God. So God heard their groanings, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now when it says he remembered them, it doesn't mean that he forgot them. He knew all along what was going on. But he's going to fulfill, honor, take care of their needs regarding the covenant. He's responding to their outcry, but he knew what was going all along. So it's this hard to explain relationship between the divine will and man's responsibility. They prayed, God heard, but God already knew. But somehow their prayer interacted with God's will so that this is being done. It's an interesting relationship that is beyond me to really explain. Verse 25, and God saw the sons of Israel, and God took notice of them. So again, it's not that he didn't notice them before. It's just that he's going to now focus his attention and his plan on them. We're going to see it start to unfold in chapter 3, but we'll stop there for today. What a wonderful story, showing how man has his plans. Pharaoh had his plan to kill all these male children, and it totally backfired on him in the sense that one of the children was rescued, actually became a member of his household. He trained him up, and now we're going to see what happens down the road. I failed to point out that with all the years that Moses is away, this particular Pharaoh dies, and he passes away, and we're going to see God mention that in the next chapter. Anyway, I hope this has been interesting for you and meaningful, and hope you'll watch the next one. In the meantime, God bless. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.